Welcome back, you wonderful AP Environmental Science students. Today we're going to explore topic 2.1, which is an introduction to biodiversity. And really, we're going to unpack what we're talking about when we say biodiversity. Our enduring understanding is that ecosystems have structure and function and diversity that change over time. So the reading that I would love for students to do is from Chapter 4 of the Miller textbook, sections 4.1 through 4.3, pages 92 through 101. After the video, I encourage you to read and maybe amend your notes if you come across something that looks important. All right, so let's unpack the term biodiversity. So when we say biodiversity, we're talking about essentially 4 different really key tenets. And we will talk about each of these in turn. So we're talking about ecosystem diversity. We're talking about functional diversity. We are talking about species diversity. And we're talking about genetic diversity within the species. When we say biodiversity, we're talking about all of those things. All right. So we will unpack each of those terms. So let's start with functional diversity. So when we say functional diversity, we are talking about representation from all of our different types of life. So there's 3 domains, 6 kingdoms of life. Right? And each of those kingdoms does different things within an ecosystem. Now, if we remember, ecosystems are systems. Okay, with different parts interact and function as a whole. Okay, so we're revisiting the idea of a system. So when we talk about functional diversity, we're talking about having all these different essential parts of an ecosystem. Some of them are essential for our food chain. So plants, for example, do we have plants in our ecosystem to bring energy into the ecosystem in the first place? Do we have varieties of bacteria and fungus that help to decompose dead plants and dead animals and cycle nutrients back? Functional diversity just means, do we have representation from all 3 domains and all 6 kingdoms? Right. Now, genetic diversity, this is going to become an important topic several times this year, especially in agriculture. But genetic diversity is referring to the variety of traits or characteristics, again, this idea of variety, within a population. The population, as we call it, is a group of the same species, right? So if I have a population of humans, all right, so this is something we can all understand well. So having genetic diversity within a population of humans is not just the variety of skin color. Some people are taller, some people are shorter. We also have variety in resilience to pathogens and certain diseases. Okay, we have varieties of talents, varieties in how fast we can run. All of those things are genetic diversity. And the reason genetic diversity is important is when we have high genetic diversity, increases likelihood that at least some individuals have genetic traits that allow them to cope with things like climate change, with things like pests or disease or predation or habitat loss. Okay, so the more variety of genetic traits that we have, which is what we're talking about when we say genetic diversity, that just means if something happens, the more diversity we have in genetics, the more likely that is at least some of the individuals can cope with whatever that change is. Okay, as long as there's not too big of a change. All right, and the importance of those being genetic traits is they can survive themselves, for one, but they can pass those same traits on to future generations. That is the importance of genetic diversity. Now, species diversity is really lumped into two different terms. We have species richness, which is the total number of different species. And this may sound a little bit like functional diversity. It's a little bit different in the sense that with functional diversity, like, do we have plants at all? Species richness, for this in this case, would be like, well, how many types of plants or bacteria or predators, etc. Okay, so it's not the same as functional diversity in terms of representation from each kingdom. It's like amongst our plant kingdom in an ecosystem, do we have lots of different types of plants? Amongst our bacteria, do we have lots of different types of bacteria? Do we have bacteria that can fix nitrogen for us? Do we have bacteria that can ammonify nitrogen from dead plants? Okay, species richness is the total number of different species, kind of by type though. Species evenness also measures species diversity, and that's more of a relative abundance, and we'll be doing a lab where we can actually learn how to measure that. That's the creek activity that I've been mentioning in class. So species evenness is, so let's say amongst our plants, so let's say I have a forest with birch, trees, we have maple trees, and we have oak trees, and let's say some spruce or something like that. Okay, so those are all trees, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 different species of trees in this area of forest. That would be richness, would be 4 species of trees. Species evenness would be looking at how, like, do we have a relatively equal number of each? So if I have, so let's say in 1 hectare, I have 4 per hectare, and then I have 5 maples per hectare, and 12 oaks per hectare, and 2 spruce per hectare. So evenness is talking about how even those numbers are, right? So this is definitely a forest that looks to be dominated by oak trees, right? If I only had 1 spruce per hectare or something like that, I would say we have pretty low evenness. These numbers were equal, so if this was like 6 and 7 and 6 and 5 for each of those, that would be a more even distribution of those species. Okay, now why is species diversity important? Because just like with genetic diversity, more species is better able to recover from disturbances to the environment, which happen naturally all the time, also happen because humans like to mess things up sometimes. All right, habitat diversity, this also, aka ecosystem diversity, is just variety of habitat types. And this is really easy to understand, you guys. The more types of habitats we have, the more types of species we can support. So more habitat variety means greater variety of species can be supported. Okay? Now, some terms that are also going to be important to us, we got what are called specialist species. I do believe we brought these up briefly earlier in the year, but let's redefine these just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Specialist species have what's called a narrow niche. They require very specific habitats. Generalist species can survive in lots of habitats. So the examples here are panda, which require a very specific type of habitat and a diet of bamboo, whereas raccoons can survive in grasslands, forests. They can survive in urban areas or wild areas. Those are specialist generalist species. Those are important because we're going to talk lots about changes to habitats, which is a big focus of this unit. So our least diverse species, which are our specialists, they tend to be the first to be impacted, whereas our most diverse species, referred to as generalists, are last to be impacted. So in this picture back here, right, if this was a eucalyptus forest, for example, in Australia, koalas require eucalyptus. They would not be able to just simply migrate out of this area to a new area, whereas specialist species could easily leave this and probably survive just fine in a different habitat. All right, so why should we care about biodiversity in the first place? Well, selfishly speaking, biodiversity is vital to maintaining what we call natural capital. We're going to learn a lot about ecosystem services and natural resources in a later topic. But we need biodiversity to provide all the stuff that we need from nature is a better way to put that. So Sylvia Earle said it very well. The bottom line answer to why we should care about biodiversity is wildlife can survive just fine without us. We, however, can't survive without them. So, all native species, all of them play a role in maintaining the balance, even if they seem insignificant or provide no obvious ecosystem service. So sometimes we introduce species that don't belong there. They can screw things up. Talk about them a little bit more later. And some species play like a super profound role. We call those keystone species. Okay. We'll talk more about those later as well.